Welcome. It is the end of the spring 2024 season, and I am late to this party. I was doing pretty good about keeping up with it weekly for the first half of the season, but then life happened, and now the season's over, and I am just now getting back to watching the shows. So this video is probably going to be pretty late, but I'm going to try not to make it too late. I'm not going to have this come out like next year or something. So I'm just going to go through all of the shows that I watched for this season and give a quick review for each one. And I'm going to try as best as I can to avoid any major spoilers. I'm some little stuff may end up slipping, but if I decide to talk about anything big for an individual show, then I'll say something before I actually say the spoiler, I guess. Probably the best way for me to go about that. Demon Slayer, Hashira Training Arc. Now I've already read the manga, so I knew exactly what was going to happen during this arc, and I am not surprised. Like, this is the best way to put it is that this is a transition from last season to the next season. Not a whole lot was ever going to happen during this little arc. But I do think that it was necessary. I think they needed the training arc and they needed to give time to build up the other characters, especially going into the next arc, which is probably going to be the final one. And I do want to give props where it's deserved, because I think they did two things right for this season. One, they kept it short. I mean, this is supposed to be a transition from one season to the next. And a lot of times what I think happens is they drag it out a little too long. This is only 8 episodes. So it wasn't super fast pace or anything. Not a whole lot really happened. But they also kept it short, so it didn't feel like it drug on for too long. And the other thing is the ending. They did the ending fucking amazing. Okay, there's a little bit of spoiler here. There is an explosion, and I guess since Ufotable didn't have to do a whole lot of action scenes elsewhere during this arc, they put their entire budget on this one fucking explosion, and it looks amazing. And then right after that, they have the ending set up hype for the next season. Like, we already know that shit's going to go down in the next season, and it's going to happen from like the first episode or as soon as it starts, because that is where they have left off from this season. And normally I don't like transitional seasons where they're just trying to go from one arc to the next, because they kind of come off as just filler. But I actually think they did a pretty good job of not making it feel that way for this arc. I'd probably say it's not the best Demon Slayer arc. It definitely feels like not a whole lot's happening. But as far as just transition arcs in general, I think this is actually pretty decent. Spice and Wolf. Okay, technically the show's not over yet, but I've seen enough. This is pretty much exactly like the older version, because this is just a remake, remaster. I don't know. They've redone the show, and I can't say that it's 100% exactly the same, because I've noticed a few little details that are different, but for the most part, it's the exact same as the older version. So if you've seen the older version, there's really no reason to watch this one, which is kind of where I am at. I do think the visual update and everything looks great. I think the show looks a lot better than what it did before. And I think they updated the voice acting. I'm not really sure on that. The voice acting was good for this newer version too. Um, but because I've seen the older one and because I remember enough of it, I don't really see a point in watching this. There's no other way for me to say that. I do like the show and the premise and everything, but I don't like rewatching shows, and that's kind of what it felt like for me watching this. So it's kind of the only thing I can say about it is if you've already seen the show, I don't really think there's a reason to watch this. Mushoku Tensei Season 2 Part 2. Man, I love this show. Mushoku Tensei and ReZero both hit that spot for me where they are story heavy, but they also have good action. And that is kind of what we get for this season. I mean, it does start off a little slow because it's coming off of the back of last season, or the first part of this season, I guess is what it technically is. But the last part was pretty slow, and transitioning from that to this season, it started off slow too. But then by the second half, there is a whole lot going on. I think what Jobless Reincarnation really excels at is hitting those emotional scenes. And there are two of them, well, three of them that happen in this season. The first one is Norn and Rudy in the dorms. Seeing his desperation at wanting to help but not really knowing how to, and him just being there for her even if he can't really do anything or doesn't know what he should be doing. And then seeing how the situation resolves after that, it's just, it was so good. The second event, I can't really talk about at all because that would be major spoilers, and I'm trying to avoid those. It is something traumatic, I will say that. And the last big emotional thing that happened for me actually happened almost at the end. It's pretty much at the end. And I'm just going to quote what it says because I think it encapsulates what I enjoy about the show. I realized that I was just a kid, just a brat using old memories to act grown up. He's been using his past memories to help him out in this world, but through all the ups and downs that he's had in this season, he's starting to realize that he's using those memories to distance himself from his life in this world. So to me, this is the turning point where he is starting to realize that he can just be who he is in this world without carrying on the baggage from his last life. And that growth is what I am here for. So I really enjoyed this season. Mysterious Disappearances. This show has mystery, it has horror, it has ecchi. I don't know what it is about horror and sexy stuff going together. I want to say there is an old movie that even brought up something along those lines where if someone has sex, then they're going to die. What was it? I want to say it was an old scary movie or like Scream or something. I don't know. It really doesn't matter because this show isn't really in the horror genre. I don't think. Like if it's far more in the mystery genre, and then with a hint of light, very light horror, and less light ecchi. This show reminded me a lot of the Monogatari series. And let me tell you, I love Monogatari. And this is nowhere near as good. Let's just go and get on the same page, not get shit twisted. I don't want to call this show mid because I don't think it's mid. I think it's slightly above mid. Like there, while I was watching it, I was entertained, but I don't really have any interest in watching any more. Like by the time it was the 11th and maybe 10th episode, I was kind of done with the show. It just feels like there's something missing to pull you in to want to see more. And I don't really know what that is. And it could, part of it could be the story itself doesn't really feel like the overall story doesn't feel all that strong. Like the main characters are there and they're related to what's going on, but also they're not. They're just kind of there to clean up the mess of other people. And it almost feels kind of monster of the week-ish, but it's not quite that bad. I don't know. I feel like I've been trash talking this show more than what I meant to, but again, I did think this was decently entertaining while I was watching it. But now that the season's over, I do think that it's fairly forgettable, which is probably what's going to end up happening to it. Unnamed Memory. All right, let's not beat around the bush here. This show was shit. Like the first couple of episodes were fine, and then they all of a sudden just decided to start speed running everything. And that's not like a hot take or a new take from me. I saw that throughout the comments while I was watching each episode because there's really just no better way to explain what was happening. Spoilers, I guess. It really doesn't matter. Don't watch this. So this story is about a prince who has a problem that he can't solve, nobody can solve it. So he goes to a witch. Now, this witch is hot. So he wants her to marry him, but she doesn't want to marry. So that is pretty much the dynamic throughout most of the season. Hey, marry me. No, I'm not marrying you. In one episode, okay, in order to maybe solve this problem, she says that she may erase his memory. Okay, fine. They're setting up something that, a little plot point here. And later on, in the exact same episode, they actually do it. She erases his memory, and not the memories of his servants or guards or anything for some fucking reason. That's never mind. I'm not gonna talk about that. That's stupid. Okay, so she erases his memory, and he wakes up, doesn't remember her. Everyone pretends like she was not there, that he's not misremembering anything. And then he remembers anyway. And he goes and finds her, and everything just goes back to normal. All of that happened within minutes. I am sitting here watching this. I'm all over the place now with my own language. I can't even fucking talk. So, a minute or maybe even 2 minutes, she erases his memory. He wakes up, doesn't remember. Everybody pretends that they don't remember anything. He all of a sudden remembers, and then goes and checks on her, and then that's the end of that whole thing. Like, they put in a plot point and immediately pulled it back out within minutes of the show. And that's the way the entire it's the way it all felt. Like, it felt like they were just trying to get through the story as fast as possible. In another episode, they have their normal back and forth of, hey, marry me. No, I'm not going to marry you. Oh, but we'll make out a little bit. Oh, no, just kidding. My ex-boyfriend who stabbed me to death is here, so I'm going to go with him. And it's like, again, all within the same episode. I have followed telenovelas that made more sense than this show. It really felt like someone had an idea of where they wanted the season to end. They had a spot within the overall story that they wanted to get to, and they were going to get to that, and it did not matter what was in between episode 1 and episode 12. They were just going to get to that point, and the entire show is just not worth watching. That's the best that I can put it. A Condition Called Love. This show was just not for me. It's romance, which I have been going and finding one every single season to watch, and so far I have been finding ones that I've actually liked. It was just bound to happen that I start finding ones that I don't. And oddly enough, I think the overall story and the plot points are fine. My biggest problem, I think, is with the writing itself, with how the story is arranged. Because 10, 11 episodes in, they do everything that they can to make the main guy really toxic. Or he looks like he's toxic, and in some ways he is, but they really, like, pound it in that he is toxic. And it's not until episode 10 or 11 before they start explaining why he is the way he is. And at that point, I just don't fucking care anymore. And I will admit that the last couple of episodes are a lot better because they actually explain everything and why he acts the way he acts. But if I'm watching a romance and 10 of the 12 episodes, the first 10 episodes, I would actually rather them just break up, then it's really hard to make that switch by the end. And I really think it could have worked if they had moved some of his reasoning to earlier points in the story and just kind of sprinkled it in instead of just dumping most of it in at the end of the story. And like the trope of having a character and you don't really know whether they're actually a good guy or a bad guy, that can work. But for me personally, it doesn't really work well with romance. And that's, in my opinion, that's kind of the biggest fault of this show, and probably the biggest reason that I didn't like it. Konosuba Season 3. I love Konosuba. And every time there's a new season that comes out, I try to lower my expectations because I know that one of these seasons It's just not going to be as good, and I am going to be sad and upset. But it hasn't happened yet. And this season is just a continuation of everything that they've been doing from the beginning. Like I don't think there's been any big changes. I mean, the story has progressed a little bit, and there's been a few extra jokes and all that fun stuff. But for the most part, they found something that worked in season one, and they have just been going with it. And that's not a complaint. I am fucking here for it. If I had to give one complaint, I would say that the gang felt a little disconnected this season. And what I mean is that a lot of times we would see one or two of them instead of all four of them together. And I just prefer it when all of them are together to create the chaotic mess that is their group. And that's really it. That's my one big complaint is that it's a great season, but it could have been better. I will say that the voice actors deserve a raise. I don't know how much they're getting paid. That doesn't matter. Pay them more. I mean, they do a great job every single season, and they have just come in and knocked this out of the park also. So this is another great season for Konosuba, and I hope that there are many more. Jellyfish can't swim in the night. Let me just go ahead and apologize because this is going to be a rambling mess. Because I'm not really sure how I feel about this anime. This story is about four high school girls who get together to make music and make music videos and stuff. And let me go and get my bias out here. I am a sucker for personal growth. And so there are some scenes and some episodes that are absolutely amazing because of that, because they do a decent job of showing that personal growth for each person. But then there are other scenes and episodes that are just kind of there. Like I don't they kind of contribute to the overall story, but also not enough for me to really care about them. So it just kind of comes off as a waste of time for some of it. So there is this roller coaster of wow, that was amazing to okay, now I'm kind of getting bored of watching this. Okay, that was amazing. Okay, now I'm getting bored. And that's the way I felt watching half of the show. I did see some comments that said this should have been 24 episodes, and I agree and disagree. I think 24 may have been too much, but I think having a little more would have more than 12 would have been better because at that point they could have maybe fleshed out some of the conflicts and the maybe connected some of the little things that were happening a little better than what they did. Because having it only 12 episodes and adding in those little moments kind of ended up rushing some of the points that I think would have been better if they slowed things down. But I also think they could have just taken out those little moments and took more time for the big events, and it still would have been fine that way too. And again, the little moments are fine. I don't think they're bad. I just don't think they work well with the overall story. And another part that kind of plays into that is it does have an ending. They did wrap everything up, and technically they could go on to say, hey, this is what they're doing now after high school kind of thing if they wanted to make another season, but I really hope they don't because I think they did a good job of wrapping up this story. And the story ending is not, how do I want to put this? It's not a satisfactory ending. I'm not going to spoil the ending, but it is both good and bad. And that probably plays into why I'm conflicted on this show. Uh, there's a lot of very high points throughout it, and then the ending just ended up being what's the word that I used the other day? Slightly above mid. And maybe I will just leave my opinion on this kind of vague. There were parts of it that I really, really enjoyed, and parts of it that were just kind of there. And that's just the way it is. Sentai Daishikaku. Go Go Loser Ranger is also a fun name. But this was probably my favorite new show for the season. And it's not even that new of a premise. Like, the good guys are actually bad. It's the exact same concept that we had with The Boys, except that is superheroes and this is Power Rangers. This is PG-13 though, so don't expect too many crazy things. There are a lot of problems with the show though, because like I think the trope of having the good guy be the bad guy is starting to get played out. But that may just be me personally, or maybe my personal views on how it seems to be for everyone else, because there are so many shows that are trying to jump on this bandwagon while they can. And it's just it's not stale yet. I don't want to say like, oh, I'm done watching it, but I do think it's going to get stale soon. On top of that, the whole premise of the story is kind of still in development, I guess we'll say. There is potential there for it to be good, but as of right now, it could kind of go either way. And the powers within the world are kind of all over the place. The main character is both weak and strong. It kind of seems like his strength depends on whatever the story needs it to be at the time. And it doesn't seem like he has some kind of hidden potential. It's just literally, hey, do we need him to be strong right now? Okay, well then make him a little stronger to be okay in this situation. And if we need him to get his ass kicked, well, he's getting his ass kicked. But despite all that, this is an action show, and it excels at the one thing an action show needs to excel at. It is fun to watch. Most of this season was super entertaining to watch. I can't say all of it because some of it was kind of boring. I'll bump it down a few pegs for that. But we're basically watching a show of a weakling trying to fuck over powerful, corrupt people. So, what's not to love? Like I said, the potential story is there, and they've already announced the next season. So, I'm going to look forward to that. And that is all of these shows that I watched for this season. And technically, I am watching My Hero Academia and Slime Isekai, but there's a lot more episodes left on those, and I haven't watched enough to know whether I like them or don't like them, so I'm just going to wait until next season before I give my opinion on those. I've also started watching Dungeon Meshi, which I also, same thing, I haven't watched enough of it to know either way, so that's also going to just get thrown in on the next season. So let me know if you agree or disagree with any of my opinions on here. See ya! Okay, this isn't anime related at all, but it's a story about my life, so I'm gonna go ahead and say it. So there was a tree outside of my house. Like, not anything big, I'd say like this thick, and it was pretty close to the house, and I didn't like it being that close to the house. So I decided, I'm gonna go ahead and cut that tree down. So like a couple days ago, went outside. I'll let you take that in for a second. And I chopped that tree down, not with a chainsaw, with an axe. So I went outside and did manual labor, which is crazy for me. And you're about to see real quick why I don't do it very often. So I actually do get the tree cut down, and I decided that I was going to cut it up into smaller pieces so it'll be easier to burn or whatever I was going to do with it. And so I started cutting off limbs, and I took a axe to the shin. Now, luckily, it wasn't anything bad. It actually wasn't even thick enough, or not thick enough. It wasn't deep enough to need stitches or anything, but it was kind of borderlining on whether I was going to need stitches or not. Which means the one time that I decided to go outside and do something, I ended up ruining a perfectly good sock because of the blood. And then I wasted a bunch of time and money at an urgent care center. So, some very obvious advice to all the lumberjacks and axe murderers: watch where you're swinging.